Hello and welcome to another installment of CSO Executive Sessions Australia. I'm Ed Kennedy, the editor of CSO Australia, and I'm very pleased to be joined today by Andrew Hotters, Chief Digital Information Officer of the Cranbrook School in Sydney, New South Wales. Andrew, welcome.
Thanks, Ed. Great to be here.
To start, can you tell us a little about your role?
Yeah, sure, Ed. As Chief Digital Information Officer, it encompasses a fairly wide range of responsibilities. These are both tactical and strategic in nature. So in conjunction with other staff, I'm tasked with developing and then implementing a technology strategy, mindful, of course, that aligns with the school's overall strategic objectives. And for me, that really revolves around identifying new technologies that can improve teaching and learning outcomes, driving pedagogy, and enhancing the overall student experience. So with a lot of collaboration with the executive team and faculty leaders, understanding what they need in the first instance, and then ensuring they can support the proposed solutions that we can offer. I also have the responsibility to the administration team and the operations team, ensure what I can do to try and streamline some of those back office procedures and processes, implementing workflows, for example, reducing human error, and also some of the mundane tasks that we need to do. So business process automation is something I really like to focus on. Underpinning all of that, of course, is managing the school's infrastructure to deliver all of these technologies. So a few years ago, we moved to the cloud, and this enabled us very quickly to pivot when COVID hit, to bring technology out of the classroom on campus to all of our students online. Corralling the brains trust to make that happen, and managing the financials to ensure that I could deliver that. And lastly, and probably just as importantly as every other piece there, overseeing the technology security and governance, ensuring compliance with regulations and policies, reviewing our technology practices, making sure they're compliant with the relevant regulations, I think is crucial. And some of those are the Privacy Act, and the Australian cybersecurity guidelines, risk identification, building mitigation strategies for those as well. So a fairly all-encompassing role, and enjoyed immensely.
What can you share with us about Cranbrook's current cybersecurity goals?
Yeah, I'm looking at two facets of this, Ed. What I need right now, and then looking at what I might need to future-proof as much as possible. So first step is developing a fairly comprehensive cybersecurity strategy, addressing as many aspects of information security as possible, including risk assessment, security policies and procedures, access controls, incident response planning, which is a big one, and employee training, which is crucial. Build on those, drill down further. For example, implement strong access controls, multi-factor authentication, role-based access control, least privilege, and enhanced password policies. And so look at the basics as well there. I think also key is regularly reviewing and updating our security policies. As you know, the world moves super fast in this space. So I try and make sure they're aligned with the ever-evolving threat landscape. It's difficult, but we do what we can. Also, don't forget the basics. Make sure you've got effective backup and recovery processes. Also look at being able to air gap data, applications, your environment quickly if a security incident has been identified. Do that as soon as possible. I mentioned employee training in passing above, and I think that's incredibly important. So with all staff, conduct regular employee training. I can't emphasize it enough, really. A recent study I saw showed that I think 83% of all incidents involve a human factor. So make sure your employees receive regular training on best practices, how to identify and report potential incidents like phishing. We all know that phishing campaigns have increased in both numbers and quality. So get your staff across that as much as possible. And where you don't have the skill set and the resources in-house, partner up with organisations that this is all about their sweet spot. Make sure that you find a partner, make the most of their knowledge and skills to help you achieve your cybersecurity goals.
2023, of course, follows a very, very eventful year for cybersecurity in 2022. How would you reflect on the year that was?
Yeah, Ed, 22 was indeed a very eventful year for cybersecurity and technology as a whole. There were several high-profile cyber attacks and data breaches globally that affected both individuals, businesses, and governments. Hark back to the SolarWinds attack. That was multiple US agencies that were affected. And then locally, we had Optus and Medicare breaches, Medibank breaches, sorry, amongst others. The list continues to grow. Of course, one of the key things and the big ticket items in this space is ransomware and the multiple strains of this sort of attack, including Mamba, which is quite nasty. Now, these were highly destructive and caused significant disruption to critical infrastructure and businesses across the globe. So from my perspective, what this did, though, was looking at the glass half full, it highlighted the need for improved security and improved security practices, better collaboration between governments and private industry, and that's never a bad thing. But it did take something like this to make that happen. I think another one that's quite unsettling that I've seen is the deep fake technology, social media manipulation. And I'm sure you've seen multiple deep fake examples. And it's quite scary just how good they are getting. So for me, there's some key areas there.
How do you see 2023 shaping up in the months ahead for cybersecurity?
Well, I think after that, we look at those attacks of SolarWinds, there might be some renewed focus on supply chain security, improving the security measures and monitoring to prevent future attacks. But the growth of ransomware as a service and cybercrime as a server offerings is really scary. Like, move over software as a service. And now it's just like SaaS. It makes it easy to buy into. Unfortunately, in this case, it's for pretty nefarious purposes. So, when I look at that, it's incredibly scary. So we've got more emphasis on zero trust security, which is a great thing. Assume all network traffic is potentially malicious and require some sort of verification before you allow access, I think is crucial. And I think there's going to be also a big focus on artificial intelligence and machine learning for cybersecurity. Let's look what happened in the last couple of months over ChatGPT and how this can be used positively. But on the flip side, I think there's a huge capability for it to be used negatively. And so we need to be quite on guard for that. So overall, it's likely to be another eventful year this year for cybersecurity. New threats emerging, new technology emerging, the existing ones evolving and changing. And I think to combat that, vigilance, flexibility is the key, if we can survive all of those and then thrive.
When it comes to the Australian cybersecurity landscape, what pleases you about its present positioning?
Yeah, I think Australia's made pretty significant progress in this area. For me, there's work still to be done to address some of the emerging threats, and it's not just Australia, but globally. But the government's taken steps to increase awareness of cyber threats and encourage, lots of businesses to adopt stronger security measures. It's great news. We've got the Australian Cyber Security Centre. We've got the Cyber Security Strategy, which aims to make Australia the best globally by 2030. That's no mean feat, but it's a great goal to aspire to. I also think another bit of the positive development is around the awareness in small business and big business about the importance of cybersecurity. So a lot of organisations I speak to are now taking proactive steps to protect their networks and data rather than waiting for it to happen and react, not trying to shut the gate after the horse has bolted. And they're starting to invest more of their money into advanced technologies and threat intelligence. So trying to be on that front foot proactively. There's help at cyber.gov.au. That's a great resource. And it's also good that Microsoft have partnered with the Australian government to provide cloud-based services that meet the security and compliance standards for our government. That's super positive.
What concerns you about the Australian cybersecurity landscape at present? What work do you think remains to be done?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is the increasing sophistication and frequency of these attacks. I've seen the phishing campaigns that have sort of gone from 0 to 100 in a very short period of time in terms of looking at them and going, wow, that's a genuine email. So there's a number of stats around this, but ransomware as a service, deepfakes, supply chain attacks, underscores the ongoing need for investment in cybersecurity. I mean, at a recent summit I attended, it was discussed that if you're not spending 20 to 30% of your IT budget on security, you're inviting the worst case scenario to happen. That's a lot of money, but I think it's warranted. I mean, as I said, those phishing emails have caught out people that you wouldn't think have got caught out. So they're barely detectable as being malicious. So I think we really need to focus our minds on improving all across the cybersecurity space. I think as well, we need to ensure the resilience of critical infrastructure. And I don't mean technology, but I think items like, our power grid, the water supplies, trucking and transportation networks, a cyber attack on those systems could really have some devastating consequences. And I think more needs to be done to protect them against some of these emerging threats. As I mentioned before, I think it's great that the government and private sector have been collaborating to drive and improve the focus on cybersecurity, but I think we continue to need to keep the pedal to the metal there. There's several initiatives that have been launched, but I think the private sector also has a critical role to play, and continuing to share information between the government and private industry will be essential to improve our resilience as a country as a whole.
Cranbrook recently achieved ISO 27001 certification. Why did you feel it was important to pursue?
Yeah, coming from a corporate background, Ed, I looked at some of the structures and governance that could be brought into the education sector and the school. I talked about proactivity earlier, and I wanted to be more proactive in the security space. Wanted to provide a fairly robust security posture to protect our sensitive data and intellectual property. As ISO 27001 certification is a globally recognised standard for information security management systems, it was the gold standard I believe the school should aim for. So I put that forward, and we embarked on the journey. Starting off, it meant that we needed to implement a fairly comprehensive set of security controls and procedures to ensure the confidentiality and the integrity and the availability of our many, many information assets. This is what I felt we needed to deliver to all of our stakeholders. So there's multiple benefits in doing that. Improve security posture and compliance with legal and regulatory requirements. But also from a school-specific environment, there's increased confidence and trust. ISO certifications are a recognised mark of quality. It shows that you take people's data seriously and can build trust with parents and staff and teachers. And you're putting appropriate measures in place to protect that data. It can also provide a competitive advantage as well. There's a crowded education market. I believe it can help differentiate the school from others and demonstrate a commitment to adhering to security best practices.
In terms of the ISO 27001 process, what was the work like throughout it for Cranbrook?
Yes, it was no small feat. It was a huge amount of work, Ed, and it required a fairly systematic approach to get there. You just can't go ad hoc and go, I'm going to go for ISO 27001 and I'll knock that over next week. No, this was a large commitment of resources and time, and executive sponsorship and support was key from the outset. And they believe this is something we should strive to achieve. So once we had that approval and that backing and foundation, the first one we needed to look at was scoping. What were we trying to do? Define the scope of the ISMS, including the boundaries of the system, what was in scope and not, what are our assets to be protected, the applicable legal and regulatory requirements, and they can be different for each industry. So we did have to be very school specific in that regard. So once we scoped it out, we then did a risk assessment, identifying the potential risks across all of our information assets and evaluate the likelihood of impact and outcomes on each risk. Then looking at that, put appropriate security controls to mitigate any of those risks. So that moves on to the implementation. We've identified the controls, we then implement them. And they can be technology measures such as firewalls and encryption, but also organizational measures such as policies and procedures. I have to tell you, though, they seem to be some of the toughest to do, changing the mindset, the hearts and minds of staff. But they're on board and they understand the importance, which is fantastic news. Now, then we monitor and review the effectiveness of those and make adjustments as necessary. This is not a static, set and forget. We conduct regular internal audits to identify those areas where we need to improve and tweak. We also conduct management reviews to ensure that it's effective and aligned overall with the school's objectives. If you can do all of that in a fairly appropriate time frame, you can apply for certification. So that involves an external audit by an accredited certification body to verify that your ISMS meets the requirements of the ISO 27001 standard. That audit typically involves a review of all of your documentation, interviews with key personnel, site inspections, and my advice in this area, make sure you have all your ducks in a row. It's a fairly intensive process. So take the time to accumulate all the documentation and get it ready for review.
What are the benefits of ISO 27001 specifically for Cranbrook to your mind?
Yeah, there's quite a few, but for me, the key benefits of achieving that was the security posture. We can demonstrate to stakeholders that we have a robust and comprehensive approach to managing information security risks, which gives some peace of mind. I think then compliance with legal requirements. I know there's many legal and regulatory frameworks that require us and other organisations to maintain effective security controls. So we can now demonstrate compliance with those requirements. I talked about increased confidence and trust early. It also shows to our stakeholders that they trust us to protect their data, which we hold on them. And that's important for schools as a whole. Parents and students can rightfully be concerned about the security of their personal information. And then continuous improvement. And becoming certified is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process. And we will continuously monitor, improve our information security practices, which leads to ongoing improvements in our overall posture, using new and emerging tools to combat the likelihood and threat of security incidents. There's also a requirement for recertification annually. So that recertification process ensures we need to constantly evolve in this area.
What insights would you share with cybersecurity professionals keen to learn more from another professional in their field?
Yeah, and I think first and foremost, collaborate with peers. No one can know everything. Cybersecurity professionals can learn a lot from their peers by sharing their own experiences and their knowledge. Network with others, develop a community of like-minded individuals who can offer support and advice. Just like the ICT school community that I joined after being in corporate. It's a very open and sharing environment. So everyone is there to leverage each other, which is great to see. I think industry events as well, keep abreast of what's going on out there. There's super opportunities to learn from experts in the field, stay up to date with the latest developments and trends. Online communities, there's a load out there. And everyone's still, once again, willing to help based on their experiences. There's a lot of opportunity for pursuing professional development in this space as well, with certifications and training courses. Higher education, it all adds to your own personal knowledge, and also can ultimately advance your career as well in the cyberspace. And I think finally, embrace a mindset of continuous learning. Cybersecurity is such a rapidly evolving field. Professionals must stay current with the latest threats, the trends, and the best practices in the organisation. Embracing that mindset of continuous learning and professional growth, I believe, is essential to staying relevant and effective in the field, as the pace of change is just so rapid and we can't keep up.
And with that last question, that brings us to the end of this conversation. Thank you to those in our audience, and Andrew, a special thanks to you for taking part in this chat.
Thanks, Ed. It's been great to be here.
Just as this has been a great conversation here, please keep an eye out for another instalment soon of CSO Executive Sessions Australia.